Guys, welcome back to the Physique Factory podcast. And today we're going to talk about injuries because we are plagued with them at the moment. But I don't know about you, but
what have you got going on? What injuries you got going
on? Mainly around the hip and lower back, just because you're the range of my hips. It's so fucking shit. Then it's like my QL. So I'm literally the right hand side. So if I start exceeding that range, if I'm doing something like a squat press and I thought, right, I need a little bit more range in it, and I can tell my back like starts rounding a bit, but I was getting away with it for a while. But then all of a sudden, it was even on like the second set where it was a bit like high reps, and it just went, and I couldn't even like bend over to pick my bag up at the end of it. It was that bad. So there's something going on with that, and it's just if I fucking start exceeding my range with my spine, and it's a good reason.
Funny that though. Some people get away with it and others don't. I remember actually I seen a video of you and Nick training, and Nick had like his heels hanging off the bottom of the squat press, and he'd done these beautiful reps where his knees were just about touching his chest. I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna do some Nick. Was that sound?
His hips, his lower back wasn't even rounding, so he wasn't like compensating through the spine at all. He just got a shit hip range. Yeah. What I did that with the it's like the toe leg press thing on the squat press where you put them at the bottom. So I started doing that up until fucking hell, my leg popped when I did it. So it was working. Yeah, it was working well. Literally everything's come from the fucking squat press that I've done. So we got to the bottom of it, and it felt like my fucking rec fem came off my fucking like my fucking leg. I was like, wow, what the fuck? You could hear it. It's like, oh, what was that? Yeah, it was. That
was like jumping a little bit there, wasn't it? But I seen that too, and then I was like, fuck it, I'm going to try it. I'm going to try some Nick Broomhead reps here. And I done it once, and my lower back went. I was fucked. So I'm same as you. Like my hip range isn't great. One of the better things I've done is buy that pre-core leg press that you actually suggested. Because like I can get so much more depth on that compared to a normal leg press. Like see before, like when I was training at the Body Academy, I wasn't really doing 45-degree leg press just because like with a hammer strength one that they had there, I could like my depth was terrible on it. Like or not terrible, but like it wasn't great. But with this one, I can get that much more out of it. And so what I say to clients a lot of the time, like when you get that client, you know, you always get a client that can fold up like brilliantly, like Nick. You know, they've got endless range at their hips, sort of thing. They're getting so much more out of the movement, getting that like extra bit of range, really, like without need to use as much weight, because obviously you get that much weaker down there. But for you and I, yeah, it's not so good. Have you tried to do anything for that then?
There's nothing really much you can do except from don't exceed your range. Been training like my back a little bit more by doing like extension and whatnot. You know, really isolating that movement.
Yeah.
But not really been doing much else, but I'm just being careful with it. So what I'll be doing next every time I go back on the squat press, I'm not going to take it out completely. I've just modified how I do it. So obviously reduce the load and then pause at the bottom. So even though I'm not exceeding range, I'm having a slight pause in that bottom range, and then come out of it. So there's a little bit more tension there at the bottom.
It's always good practice anyway, just to like pause at either end of the range. Because I feel like if you tell a beginner client that you're like pause at either end of the range, they'll kind of control what's within the range as well. So it's like always quite a good cue. But like, have you ever tried like any sort of like isometric sort of stuff, like you know, like the low level isometrics for like hip flexion or like abduction or anything like that, external rotation?
I do that before I actually do any like leg pressing, just so I can open up and get a little bit more range when I'm doing so. But it's not that. It's literally the structure of my pelvis, you know, where it's angled.
I would say I've been doing a little bit of abduction in particular pre-leg sessions, and I would say I always feel comfier leg pressing after that. I don't think I get any more range. I just feel a bit sturdier for some reason that I can't really tell you. Just through like obviously personal experience, it feels better, so I'm rolling with it, which isn't always the way to go.
You need to try these things out. If they work, then that's fine. It's just good to explore these things, isn't it?
Yeah, and every situation is so unique, and there's so much to come into injuries as well, and like a lot of it, like we were just talking before we came on there. Everyone says that in every podcast, by the way, don't they? We were just talking about this before we came on, but we were just talking about this, and like some of the like treatments that I've kind of had, like again, I'm not sure how effective they are, or if it's like a gap in my knowledge that I just don't understand it. But at the same time, like if you believe in a treatment, if you like, so if you think sports massage is the be all and end all, and you're like, oh, I just need a massage on my back and it'll be fine, then it probably will be fine, assuming you've not done any like major actual damage. You know, obviously you can't really imagine that to be better. You can't like cut your arm off and be like, oh, I feel fine. No, I feel fine. It'll be okay. But
Like your head to begin with, because most people who recover from back injuries, they still think there's something there. This is where you get like referrals for CBT therapy. But maybe if you're doing like a therapy like that, when you're doing like sports massage, and it's in your head that it will make it better, then that's counteracting that placebo with that placebo, if you get me. And then it's started working. So if it works like that mentally for someone, then why not?
it placebos your way out of
That's it.
it.
Yeah, placebo yourself out a placebo, and then
I always wonder that as well about like taking like multivitamins, things like that. I'm like, I wonder if there's anything actually in half of these like multivitamin supplements, but like it feels good and I feel healthier for it. So like, but the amount of clients I've said, oh yeah, go take a multivitamin, it's probably good practice, whatever. And oh, I feel amazing. My energy levels are through the roof, and I'm like, hmm, are they? Maybe they
maybe.
are. I don't know. Maybe you've been deficient in a certain supplement, not supplement, vitamin, and that's sorted now. But maybe it's placebo effect. I don't know. Placebo effect's got a lot to answer for.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in pain though. Eh? Like when you talk about injuries, like I don't know how many clients that we'll have dealt with that have some form of pain, and some of that you'll never get away from, really. Yeah.
Shoulder, knee, back.
It's not something you should tell your client really though. It's like, sorry, you won't recover. That'll never get any better.
Make it somewhat better, can't you? It's just managing it. It's hard to see what it is. You need that list of potential reasons what it could like potentially be, and then go through that, tick them off as you go, and then see what you can do about it.
It's
If
not
you
our
need to do
job
it,
at the end of the day, is it? Our job is to find a way around it, like you say, find a way for them to train.
some things we just need to like, yeah, work around it. We shouldn't be trying to fucking solve everything. Like it's a bit out of our scope. We should was like, oh, fucking hell. Maybe a surgeon needs to fucking repair like a bulging disc or something like that. Do you know what I mean? So
You get those not clients, but you get those PTs who will talk about like, oh, this client has anterior pelvic tilt. What do you think of those?
well, if they've got anterior pelvic tilt, can they go into posterior pelvic tilt? And if they can, then there's not really an issue if they can get into that position. So
Yeah, it's just I suppose it's just a direction you'd maybe call it. It's kind of like saying you've got kyphosis or you've got lordosis. It's like they're just directions, aren't they? Really, at the end of the day, because the whole pelvic tilt thing is a spinal or hip movement, really, isn't it? It's not a
it's not,
pelvis specific thing.
yeah. It's like if you're tilting your pelvis. So if you're going into anterior tilt, you're going to go into extension. If you're going posterior tilt, you're going to go into flexion, a little lumbar spine. So it's all from the
And
spine
the
at the
hip as well, I suppose, at the hip joint.
yeah, of course. So yeah, if you go into posterior tilt, then you're going into
Hip
extension.
extension.
And then if you go into anterior tilt, you're going into hip flexion, aren't you?
I'm currently just sitting doing it and I'm thinking about that as I go along.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's more of like I suppose the motion that comes from that. Like you actually had a video up kind of about that. Your what you call it, your hip thrust thing you were talking
Oh,
about.
yeah. So you don't want to when people doing the hip thrusts. The easy thing to do is just fucking start tilting your pelvis. But as we
It's
said,
like they're trying to shag fuck out of someone, really.
yeah, it's weird as fuck. But yeah, it's you're somewhat going into like what the fucking hell? What did we just say then? So posterior tilt, you're going into hip extension, aren't you? Slightly, and then
Yeah.
anterior tilt, hip flexion. So you're somewhat going into flexion extension, but not too much. You're probably losing a bit of leverage for the glutes when you do go into
And
posterior
it's
tilt.
probably like more about what's happening in that spine as well, because if you're like bringing your hips down, so if you're going into anterior pelvic tilt, you're going into the extremes of spinal extension, which under a lot of load that most people are doing on a hip thrust, probably not a great idea.
Mm. So I think a good cue would be go horizontal to vertical. So horizontal at the top and then go vertical at the bottom. So set up so you've got enough room to go into like a vertical position. So
Yeah.
this is why you wouldn't, I don't, doing like a hip thrust off a bench, I don't really rate it because there's not enough room to get into that vertical position. So maybe if you want to set up on a Smith machine, put it up a little bit higher, just so you can think about driving those hips underneath at the bottom, and then when you extend, it's our body changing position rather than tilting at the hips. So that is true hip extension.
I never actually thought about doing it on like a Smith machine, or if you've not got a Smith machine, like a rack with a bar setup. And what are you putting a hip thrust pad on it to like lean against for them? Yeah,
Yeah,
I never thought about that. Actually, it's a good idea. I'm
it's
training legs tonight, but I'm not doing hip thrust.
but you can move a lot more through it as well. It enables more range rather than being like your back locked fixed into something. So you got a little bit more movement with it.
Something I've used a lot as well since you actually showed me it was a hip thrust with the toes elevated as well. Take the friction out of it. What a great
Yeah.
idea.
It's cool, that isn't it? It's
Yeah.
just I say like loads of people say, "Oh, you need to push down for your heel." It's a load of shit. You just need to think about which way you're pushing on your foot. Maybe if you do push through your toes a little bit, you might be getting a bit more like friction that way. But it depends how you do it because there's a skill of doing it. So as
Yeah.
long as you're pushing straight down through the ground, so the force is coming back up through your tibia, then you're not really going to get much friction, which is
Try
going
to
to make quad.
try to reduce that like resultant really that friction then that resultant force, isn't it? But like yeah, it's an interesting one to hip thrust. I actually quite like teaching it to clients, but I actually don't really do it much myself. Like you have to do it a few times to obviously get a feel for it and muck around with it. But yeah, I don't never do it myself. I feel like it's just not a man's exercise, is it?
To be fair, I don't do it. I rarely do it. I've got Bulgarians in there instead, contralateral ones, and fucking hell, yeah,
But
they feel a lot.
you're not working the glute into the shortened range there, which is what you're probably missing out on.
Yeah, exactly,
But
exactly. That's
there's a thing though, right? Okay, we've kind of changed the subject and we went off like we always do. But do you believe that you need to train every muscle into a shortened and a lengthened position? Because like I talk about it a lot, people on social media talk about it a lot, but does it matter? You need to get to the extremes of both ends of the range with every muscle.
I think it depends how much range you've got. Some people might even not even can't
What an answer.
got something. It totally depends, doesn't it? So, what's the person was like, oh fucking hell, they can't get into that position or where the lat's like fully lengthened or whatever that is
Yeah.
because they've got some sort of shoulder issue. Then obviously they're just training a lot at like a mid range, mid to short range. So it depends what a person's got in front of you. Then just
Yeah.
load it up as much as you can. That's where all this fucking stuff goes like out the window
Yeah.
because you know what someone's if there's somebody can get into a lengthened range, a shortened range, or whatnot. So how does that all these studies mean for them?
It's kind of like, well, they're talking about these length and range partials, but define length and range. That's kind of what you're saying, isn't it? Like, what is a length and range for you? What is a length and range for me on such and such an exercise? Like, taking RDL, for instance, like, I think that's probably one of the ones you see the most that people struggle for good range at, whether it's at actually in their hamstrings or whether it's at their spine. It's like, well, how are you going to do a length and range partial if you can't get into the length and range? It doesn't really make sense, does it?
Exactly. It's like there's only so many sarcomeres you can put in series as well, and this is why the length and range partial stuff is really only applicable to like newbies in the gym because there's once you've gained all those sarcomeres in series, you can't fucking start growing like muscle beyond their attachment points, can you? So it's not going
Not
to
yet,
happen.
anyway. We'll find a way.
So yeah, there's only so much you can do that for. So
I feel
that's where
like see where you live, James, obviously in the northeast of England. Just to clarify. Um, was that northwest? Yeah, sorry, you're not in Newcastle. Imagine you just come on here with a thick Geordie accent next time. But I think like see where you're at. There's obviously I think fitness in general is just a bigger thing round about there, or there's a lot more people in the industry amongst there. I think you get hit with all the bullshit a lot more than me. I don't think I see as much of the bullshit, which is probably a good thing.
yeah, I see it a lot in the gyms all the time, all the fucking time. Well, it's just mainly on social media. That's where I see the worst of it anyway. So it's
Yeah, the worst of everything is on social media, of course. You see some crazy things, and we were just talking about that again before we came on. The people doing the cuffed lateral raises, but they're holding a D handle. It's like, make up your mind. Which fucking attachment are you using?
you're doing a cuff lateral raise to make sure you're not holding anything in your grip, which distracts from what you're doing, and then you're gonna hold something in your hand anyway. So
What is the logic? Is there actually? Do you know if there's any actual logic in it? Because maybe we're just being stupid as fuck.
I've heard someone say, "Oh, it activates the muscle more." That's the only thing I've heard. Oh yeah, it activates your delt more.
So that force coming from the cable doesn't activate your delta.
No, no, apparently not. There's no force from the cable if you're not holding on to anything. Apparently,
Cables don't build muscle anyway because like it's only barbells and dumbbells that do
exactly. But you got
it.
the machines don't. They're not functional.
Certain machines do. It depends. It depends how hardcore they look.
Oh, hack squats do. Yeah, there
Yeah,
you go.
hack squats. Hack squats have taken over, I must admit, like in the last like what 5 years or something. I feel like the hack squat has become the thing, eh? Like whatever happened to the barbell squat?
Exactly. No one fucking back squats anymore. To be fair, I never really back squatted anyway. But
No,
just
I do it to be fair. I do it weekly, but I've been doing safety bar recently just for the crack, to be honest. But I think actually last week I did a barbell back squat. And I've just been shoving it to the end of my workout because I find like so the going back to the original subject, the injuries, the kind of wee niggly thing I've got in my back, I find it presents itself most after doing something like a deadlift or a barbell squat, things that you're loading quite heavily, really. That's probably more the issue than the exercise themselves. So again, I'm not saying those exercises are causing them or those motions or those positions, but probably the tolerance of the load is more the issue there more than anything because you can use a lot of loading these exercises. But yeah, I actually I really enjoy both of those exercises, the squat and the deadlift. Something about squatting, like I never used to like it as much, but I don't know. I just like that feeling of squatting for some reason. It's good, but like yeah, I'm not quite doing what I was doing in the past. I used to be strong enough-ish for a small natural man, but yeah, putting them at the end of the workout means that obviously you're not using quite as much load. So again, like so there's kind of what we were talking about before. It's like how do you if you've got this niggle or injury and it's not going away and you can't find a way to get rid of it, well, you need to train in the meantime, don't you? So how can you do it? And that's something I find very useful. Is just putting those exercises where you're using a lot of load, where you're exceeding your tolerance to some degree, putting them to the end of the workout, where you're more tired and less weight becomes more effective. That's something I would personally do.
yeah, you just got to find like what ranges are causing issues, what loads are causing issues, and then somewhat work within that what you can do at the moment. And then as you start tolerating more, then you can start loading it more. You can start going into ranges that have not causing any issues, and that's how you progress things like that.
Because most people's say you get an injury, right? Let's start it from the start. Like imagine this young guy, we'll call him David. David's going to the gym. No one's called David nowadays, are they? That's quite an old-fashioned name, really. Yeah. But anyway, we'll roll with it. And he's going to the gym. He's been training for a few years. He's like fancies himself as a bit of a gym goer, and he's got his gym shirt clothes on. Anyway, and he's in the gym and he hurts his lower back doing I don't know a deadlift or doing a leg press or something like that. And he comes back. What does he do? Oh, well, he doesn't deadlift. He doesn't leg press. He doesn't do the exercises that like he sees as the problem. Like these exercises are problems. So starting with that, like there's so many other things. Like you hurt yourself in the gym in that moment, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that's the problem. You know what I mean? Or that itself is a problem because there's so much more that comes into this. That you know,
Might be up to it.
what's that? Sorry.
Might be things leading up to doing that specific exercise. It's like loads of people say to me, like clients, "Oh fucking hell!" I was like, "I've hurt my back just turning around in the car to get some out the back seat." It was like, chances are it's not that's done it. It's something that you've done leading up to that that's going to cause the issue.
It's the condition, I suppose, the current state or something. I don't know if that's what I want to call it. But like everything that comes into it. So, like, how well did you sleep last night? Maybe not just last night. How well have you slept for the last 10 years? You know, take that into account. What is your stress levels like? Is your nervous system in a sympathetic state 24/7? Are you chronically stressed? What have you been doing all day? Have you been sat at a desk? How are you sitting like me, like folded over to one side, not with my head back, hunched over, like have you been sat like that for 8 hours straight? You know, what have you been eating? What's your nutrition like? How good is your nutrition? How much water have you drunk? You know, all these things. They are gonna somehow mold into this, aren't they? Um,
Yeah, whenever a client comes to us, we need to know what their like daily settings have been, don't you? Like if
Yeah.
they've been sat down all day, they've been really, really stressed, really fucking stressed, then chances are it's not a good idea to go into a set of fucking well, two sets of 6 to 10 deadlifts or RDLs or something like that. That's going to cause a lot of fatigue and potentially result in injury. So you need to be careful with things like that and to see what people are like on the day. And then again, like sleep, as you just said, have they eaten, etc.
I find like again talking about like have you been sitting in this position all day or have you been standing in this position? Have you been shoveling stuff at work? Have you been, I don't know, twisting, playing golf, for example, rotating from your lumbar spine, for example, there's so many things. What about carrying a kid, for example, on one side, carrying shopping on one side, just so many things that can come into it. And like you got to think of the bigger picture. You got to think about what are all the influences. What you talked about list of potential reasons. Well, yeah, what are all the influences on this injury and like I suppose where do you go from there with it? You can't just come in and say, right, okay, it was the deadlifts. And it's always deadlift, squats, leg press. It's always like the big multi-joint movements that get the blame. But like, yes, like poor programming might come into it to some degree because I'm thinking bench press, for example. Bench press isn't for everyone. Um, so there would be better alternative exercises. And again, maybe with deadlift, maybe there is a better alternative exercise, but these exercises although they are, as I say, there is that problem that there can be poor programming. Um, but like these exercises always take the blame when, again, avoidance of them isn't often the only way to do it or isn't often a great way to do it. Again, speaking from my personal experiences, first time I had lower back pain, I was working as a builder and I was like wheelbarrowing all days, well, every day and like bent over positions, maybe like cutting stone and things like that was still sore. Probably wasn't sleeping great, was using loads of caffeine. So like that was definitely I wasn't stressed, but like certainly from that perspective, like a sleep perspective, it was pretty poor. Nutrition probably wasn't that great because I was quote unquote bulking, just a mad bulk. So all that stuff kind of came into it, and then I hurt my back deadlifting, and I got to the stage like you get that little bit of sciatica and that, and like I was even trying to do like a seated row, like the seated cable one where you've got to be flexed at the hip and like you're stretching out that sciatic nerve. Not that I knew that at that time, and even I couldn't do that. I was like fuck this. I'm not doing deadlift. So like I didn't deadlift properly for like a year, and nothing really got any better. Like it still kept popping up from time to time, and the only time it ever got any better is when I slowly started reintroducing the deadlifts, funny enough, slowly started using those muscles again. So not using the muscles isn't the answer in my experience.
Yeah, I mean, you need to strengthen them, don't you? And make sure they're still doing the job and still contracting and being there rather than just doing nothing because that's how you can go backwards.
What is it Michael talked about when they talk about like graded exposure? Is that kind of how they like yeah.
You want to start off with like contraction, don't you? So start off with like an isometric contraction and then just with the intensity, progress the intensity through that. So maybe start on like a 3 to 4, then you can progress the intensity up to like 8 to 9 to 10 or something like that. And then once you progress that, then you can go into more isolated movements itself in terms of like training. Say if it's your back issue, you've got a back issue, training flexion and extension in the spine. And then once that's better, then you can start integrating it in terms of like barbell rows, deadlifts, things like that. So that's the graded exposure thing.
Yeah, that's. I mean, that's again. If I had my time back with that, that's what I would have done from the start. I probably would have done something a bit more like that. And then it's your head as well because like you talked about earlier, if you hurt yourself deadlifting or you believe you hurt yourself deadlifting, well, next time you go to deadlift, you've got that fear in your head, don't you? And like, I'm not saying you can think yourself into injuries, but certainly it's there, isn't it? It's hanging about and it's affecting your decision making. Sure, and it's like it's hard to get over that. Really, it's hard to teach your mind because I suppose like if think about my dog, right? Like this is going to be a weird like kind of side path sort of thing, but my dog doesn't understand that when I go out the door and I'm going to work to I don't know make money to pay for the bills so that we can still stay in this house and the house is warm and she can get her food and things like that. She doesn't understand that, right? In her experience, the door shuts, I'm gone, I'm not playing with her. She's raging, right? That's the way she sees life. She doesn't know any better. So if you've done a deadlift and you've hurt yourself on it, that is your experience with that exercise. And that is the only experience you really know, really, or the main experience anyway, that's gonna it's gonna it's gonna change your vision of deadlifts almost, so to speak. So until someone teaches the dog that actually this is why I'm going to work and this is the reasons for it, she doesn't know that. She only knows one way, and because you've hurt yourself in this exercise and you only know that, it's like, well, you can't be blamed for trying to avoid it, but at the same time, you need to learn to re-expose yourself to it. And again, just exactly what we're talking about. It's a weird story that, but I think it makes sense.
Yeah, it's when I first started getting into the gym after like a year or so, I was wondering, I was like, why is my back and my hips absolutely in agony from doing deadlifts? I just couldn't work it out. And why I was in agony like that was because I had no range to go into in
Yeah.
terms of like, so I was literally going straight to the floor, doing RDLs, thinking, oh, I'll do a deficit RDL, stuff like that, where I shouldn't be doing that anyway. I had no range to get into that position anyway. Really,
Deficit
really,
RDLs, yeah. The
yeah,
worst thing you could have done.
exactly. Couldn't fucking tolerate it. And then my hips were hurting, my back was hurting. I was like, why is it always hurt every time I do this? So I don't understand. I was like, I'm controlling it. I'm not lifting like loads, not throwing it around, but it's just the range thing.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. And it's hard to understand that at the start because people just tell you, oh, you've got to do these exercises. Again, go back to squat, bench, deadlift, got to do them. And that's it. Like, well, you don't have to do them obviously, but it's like and those exercises, although I've kind of contradicted myself because I'm saying they get the blame for a lot, which they do, and sometimes it's unjustified, but sometimes it is justified, and sometimes
How people perform them though, it's like you should be performing them this way. The bar should touch your chest. The plate, it's not when you're doing a deadlift, should touch the floor. You
yeah.
need to go arse the grass when you're squatting.
Yeah, yeah. I think as well with the shoulder stuff, the shoulder injuries. I mean, again, there'll obviously be so many like scenarios for it, but I think that is one that has often come up through poor training choices. Just like exceeding ranges, because a lot of people in a squat, they'll probably not go ass to grass because it gets hard down there, and I know a bench press does too. But like I'm thinking about a lot of guys. A lot of guys will be like, "Yeah, I better touch the fucking bar off my chest," but a lot of guys have no problem doing a half rep on a squat or, obviously a deadlift, you can't get out of it. But I think I think there's a lot of poor programming and poor execution when it comes to pressing movements, flies and things like that. I feel like there's a lot more poor execution with that kind of stuff. So uh,
Oh, dumbbell flies, they go through me sometimes. Every time I see someone doing it, it's just the bouncing and how fast they are going into that range that they're going to exceed that we can't get to properly. And it's like,
not an
oh,
exercise I would ever use personally. Just
maybe if I'm restricted on equipment and they've only got
yeah.
dumbbells, something like that, then it's just how you perform it. Obviously, you need to be careful that bottom range because there's so much going on at your shoulder when you're in that range.
That's a good point, like with injuries as well. Like it's getting into, I suppose, like fully lengthened range, or as much a lengthened range as you can get to. They're more than likely to be kind of like more risky positions, aren't they?
Yeah,
If there is going to be risky positions. So I think with training in general, and I'm just thinking back to like that the YouTube video I done yesterday on shoulder training. A lot of what I talked about is like minimizing risk. It's like, why would you do a shoulder press out here? Are you still there?
I'm still, yeah.
Yeah, it just flashed. Like, what have I just like put something on the screen?
Put hands up.
How the fuck have I done that? Oh, it's because I've done this.
Oh, was it? And
Yeah,
it's
look. If you do it for long enough, it comes up. Hail Hitler.
oh, is it?
But yeah, sorry, going back to what I was saying, like shoulder pressing. So if you're way out here in this position, right, and you're shoulder pressing out here, well, that's like it's an end range of like external rotation. You're in like a close pack position with your ligaments. So is there any benefit to shoulder pressing here compared to bringing my elbows in and shoulder pressing there? No, there's no benefit either way, is there?
Just I don't understand why so many people press from that position. It just feels so uncomfortable. Just a not a good, it's not a good idea to be in. It's that even on a Smith machine when I see people pressing like so upright there, the bars like that, I'm like, oh, how are they getting into that position? Because you've got when you're in that externally rotated position there, obviously you've got to rotate inwards as we're pressing to get into that position above our heads. So it's a bit, oh, it's not,
It's
yeah, it's not
it's
nice.
it's like what's the point? Like there's more risk here, but we're doing the same thing as we were doing here anyway, but we just have less risk here. So why not do the same thing with less risk? That's kind of the way I look at it anyway. Like if you can minimize risk of injuries and niggles, and remember, injuries don't happen fucking straight away. It's not just like that. It's like, osteophytes, for example. they can take fucking years, can't they? And like all of a sudden you're just like, oh, I've got this odd feeling. And I'm thinking back to a guy that I know who had an osteophyte in his wrist, and it would be his radiohumeral joint is where it would have been. And like you want to see the size of this osteophyte because he had to get it removed. I sent you, didn't I? And I bet you, like, I don't know, obviously, I don't know, but I bet you that's a lot to do with like doing like barbell curls, for example, which isn't structurally suited to most people, like 9 out of 10 people, maybe more than that.
Yeah, that's it. When you're in that lock position, that restrained position with that bar, and you can't get into it, and you've got to somewhat like rotate at the shoulders, and you're forcing yourself into that supinated position. Ugh.
It's one of those things like I mean he was in like he'll be like kind of mid to late 50s. I hope he doesn't listen to this because I might be wrong there. But like I'd imagine he's done 20 years worth of barbell curls, maybe longer than that. And like you might get away with it for 15, but actually on that 15th year you might start getting this pain in your kind of wrist and your kind of elbow sort of area or inside your elbow. And like these things don't just happen. Just because you get away with it today doesn't mean that you'll always get away with it. It's like smoking 20 fags today. It doesn't mean that you're going to get away with it for the rest of your life, does it?
Like if you continuously do it, it's just going to add up and add up and add up, and then
It costs
shit.
a lot of money. Fuck that. Are you still in the vapes, James?
No, no, I'm not vaped. Well, when I went out the
I'm like
weekend,
Queen.
I know he's like no, though he's like no. When I went out the weekend, I had one just because of like a social thing of it. But no, technically, barring that, I'm not vaped for 2 months.
Oof. He's on it. He's on it. You're doing good.
I had that at the weekend and it made me sick. I was like, whoa. I was like, that's horrible. I was like, what have I been doing? What the fuck's that about?
Yeah, they're certainly not good, but like I suppose did it help you blunt your appetite when you were prepping?
A little bit. It was just something to have. It was more the habit. So turns out I wasn't addicted to nicotine. I was just addicted. Well, it was just the habit of
The
doing.
movement.
Yeah, it was just that. So
Holding
yeah, I'm glad
something
that.
out.
Yeah, I'm glad that I stopped it. So as soon as I stopped it for a couple of days, I totally forgot about it, and then it was gone.
There you go. There you go. Do you want to wrap that up on injuries then? Do you have anything to kind of summarize that? How do we summarize that?
Um,
Program well, and if you do get injured, gradient exposure, gradual exposure.
that's it. So all I'd say is, if you do get injured, don't associate the exercise with being bad, and it be potentially the reason how you're doing it or the things leading up to doing it why it's caused an issue.
Yeah, there's more to it. There's layers to it. Is probably what I would say. There's layers to injuries. And there's more to it. So seek professional advice from someone
That's
who
it.
deals with injuries.